Smoking electronic cigarettes could soon be illegal in most public places in San Francisco.
But I think it's really important to show, I had a banana flavored one, here's a peach flavored one, but I know that other flavors from bubble gum, gummy bears, and other flavors are not targeted at elders, they're targeted at teens and youth.
The Board of Supervisors voted unanimously this week to include e-cigarettes in the city's strict anti-smoking laws. A similar measure is being considered in Santa Clara County next week, and restrictions have already passed in Los Angeles, New York, and elsewhere. E-cigarettes are gaining popularity, especially among teens. They provide nicotine, but instead of producing smoke, they emit a vapor. Supporters say they offer smokers a less harmful alternative. Opponents contend e-cigarette makers are targeting young people through marketing. Joining me now for a discussion about e-cigarettes are Michael Mullins, founder and CEO of Digital Ciggz; Rachel Grana, researcher at the Center for Tobacco Research and Education at UCSF; and Marisa Lagos, San Francisco Chronicle City Hall reporter. Marisa, let's begin with you. How do these cigarettes work, and why do San Francisco lawmakers feel a need to regulate them at this time?
So these are little tubes, Michael will show you one later, that have a cartridge in them that actually includes nicotine and some other chemicals. When you inhale them, it is lit up, heated up, not as hot as, say, a combustible cigarette, but enough to emit this vapor or aerosol, as researchers are calling them now. And essentially, the Board of Supervisors said we're seeing use of these explode among all sort of levels, and they wanted to basically protect people. Eric Marr, the sponsor, says that even though they're not as bad as cigarettes, he still feels that they're polluting other people's space with dangerous chemicals. And they really, cities around the nation and counties have pointed to the FDA's lack of regulation of these as sort of a reason to step in. Although, arguably, the city might be doing this regardless of what the FDA said, because our smoking laws, supersede any sort of national laws.
So these e-cigs are e-cigarettes are essentially pretty new. They've been around for only about 7 years. Rachel, you and your colleagues at UCSF did a study on them, on the marketing of these devices. What were your key findings?
We found that the products, we did an analysis of the online website marketing, and we found that the products are being marketed in ways that might appeal to kids. They're being marketed with fruit, candy, and even alcohol flavors, and there's also marketing that features celebrities, including on television. And television has been closed to tobacco cigarettes since about the 1970s. So people might be seeing something that looks like smoking advertised on television for the first time in their lives.
And what's the impact of this marketing, do you think, among young people?
I think it could be appealing to young people, and what we do know is that data from the CDC show that e-cigarette use among youth has also risen rapidly. From 2011 to 2012, it doubled, and that's very concerning.
And I think the same CDC study also found that 1 in 5 middle schoolers who tried e-cigarettes say they had never tried a cigarette before. Michael Mullins, you own 3 stores in San Rafael and Santa Rosa that sell these devices. What do you make of the various arguments and concerns about the products that you sell?
Well, the same kind of arguments and concerns have been going on for quite some time now. One of the ones that I hear over and over is the flavors. Flavored, they got rid of flavored cigarettes, so that you can't have that anymore. But one thing that people seem to forget is that I'm an adult. I'm in my 30s, late 30s. I like flavors too. And I like chocolate, and I like peach, and I like all those flavors too. And I don't think that because, I believe that there's some regulation that needs to happen. I believe that there's some good manufacturing practices that need to start happening. And I believe that rolling these kind of products in with tobacco rules and regulations is not the answer. I think that there should be a classification itself for this product rather than just a tobacco product.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the city level, it was sort of an issue of expediency, right? The city wants to treat these like tobacco products because it's easier, because they can say, you know what, don't smoke these where you can't smoke cigarettes. And in San Francisco, quite frankly, it's easier to say where you're allowed to smoke than where you aren't.
Sure.
Really, in your own home and curbside are the only places that are really legal. You can't smoke in parks, you can't smoke at bus stops, you can't smoke in public buildings and businesses. So I don't know that the Board of Soups really stuck their toe into the debate, or is this a tobacco product? I do think that they definitely talked a lot about the issue of kid use and the fact that they sent some youths out right before the vote and said it was incredibly easy to buy these.
Well, Rachel, is there any credible evidence that there are harmful toxins and chemicals in e-cigarettes?
So because the product's unregulated, there's not a public accounting of exactly what's in the product. So users may be exposed to things that they're not aware that they're getting. What we do know from research that's already been conducted to date on the e-cigarette liquid and the aerosol is that there are some toxins found in the vapor, and there's also nicotine. In the aerosol, and there's also nicotine. So people who are exposed to that may be exposed to those toxins and nicotine. So a lot of the
samples that you tried, that you sampled,
that
correct?
People, not myself, but other researchers have conducted analyses of across brands. Yes,
correct.
Well, let me ask you this, Michael. I mean, it's obviously there are health concerns, there are concerns about marketing to young people. Are there beneficial uses of e-cigarettes? I mean, are they? Do they greatly reduce the risk of tobacco-related deaths among smokers of regular cigarettes if they were to switch to this as an alternative?
I'm pretty confident, without any scientific evidence, that if you were to put 20 people in a room and have them smoke cigarettes for 60 years and put 20 people in another room and have them use e-cigarettes for 20 years, that those people would definitely be, their smoking cigarettes would probably pass away faster or have health concerns faster than the others. So it's not a cure-all. It's not a, I don't believe it's a smoking cessation device or a tool. It's, like I said, it's a lesser of two, much lesser of two evils.
Yeah, and I think even the folks at UCSF who she works with would say that. You know, Stan Glantz, who runs the center, told me, you know, these are 1/10 as bad as cigarettes. We think cigarettes are terrible, so being 1/10 as bad doesn't mean to make them good. Personally, I know people who have used them to help quit. I know people who tried to use them to help quit and ended up just sort of using them in scenarios where it was not acceptable to smoke a combustible cigarette. I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of the manufacturers are concerned about these types of regulations, is that they have been marketing them as a sort of way around anti-smoking laws, right? You can light up in an office, you can light up, you know, at a club, wherever. You don't have to go outside. And so I think that that's one of the reasons that in other places we've seen a lot of industry pushback.
So that's one of the,
Go ahead, please.
That's one of the main concerns, is that also one of the conclusions of the analysis of the marketing that I found is that they're explicitly marketed to get around smoke-free laws and as a convenience, or just like smoking but without the negatives. So what is concerning is that in the cross-sectional studies, which means when you look at who's using e-cigarettes, most e-cigarette use is among current smokers, and that represents what we call dual use. So they're using both e-cigarettes and cigarettes, and a concern would be that people might just use it in places where they can't smoke, keep smoking, and not quit, and not make quitting cigarettes a long-term and a short-term goal, which really is what would save you from the death and disease associated with smoking tobacco cigarettes. The goal should really be to quit all tobacco cigarettes, and that dual use of both products is a concern.
And what makes this so fascinating, of course, is that it's a big market, $2 billion in sales last year, and some analysts have said that it could even eventually exceed the $80 billion tobacco market. So certainly something that a lot of lawmakers are watching. In fact, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors holds its second vote next week, and it is expected to be signed into law. All right, well, thank you all for joining us. Marisa Lagos, Michael Mullins, and Rachel Grana.